All right, Matt, we're in episode 1. Hey, everybody. I'm Adam Tischler. Matt, why don't you introduce yourself just out of the start while we're all looking at each other?
Right. I'm Matt Jones. Nice to meet you.
Yeah. Listen, we're both board members from USA SUP. If you haven't heard of us, well, thanks for finding us here. If you have heard of us, wonderful. If you have heard of us and you're a member, even better. If you're not a member, you can join by going to usasup.org and click a couple buttons, and voila, you're a member, and you get a sweet sticker and hopefully a whole lot more. As our organization grows, we started really this year. USA SUP exists to do a couple of things. Really, it's about creating that big community in the United States. We all belong to our own regional and local communities. There's a lot of grassroots efforts going on there. We're trying to knit those together to grow and improve the sport for the sake of safety, inclusiveness, and fairness. And then, of course, there's the really wonderful things we can do at the top levels of the sport that we're really looking at down the line and into the future. So from the bottom to the top in the United States in the sport of SUP, we're trying to grow it and make it cohesive. Matt, what drew you into the effort?
Yeah, just growing up in other sports, you're exposed to more well-run, cohesive tracks and ways to get from point A to point B and make dreams come true. And getting asked to join a really fun, knowledgeable group of people to try to pursue that dream in SUP was too good of a thing to say no to. So here we are, getting to talk about our favorite sport.
Yeah, no, it's great. So we're not going to bore you talking about ourselves or a large organization. We want to talk about this sport, and there is a lot, Matt, that went on this past summer. I got to tell you, I feel like this summer was a bit of a return to the glory days. The one thing that was missing, and there's been good news recently about this, was SUP racers commentary around some of these races. But we had some surprise events like the Oklahoma City event, which was incredibly well run, fun to watch. The people who were there came back with rave reviews, I frankly wasn't expecting people to come back from Oklahoma City in August and say that was about as much fun as I've ever had. But they did. So there's a lot to cover. There's also like, that was really good. There was so much that was really good, but there's a couple of things. There was some controversy. We're not even going to get into the video of the APP event in Southern California earlier when we had the boat that steered. But there's a lot that's gone on. And one of the things in USA SUP that we talk about is really kind of what rules are we going to adopt. And Matt, you've been, in addition to SUP, you're also really involved in the climbing world as well. And that sport's just gone to the Olympic level. And so I know you guys have really struggled with that, or maybe struggle is not the right word, but have really worked hard on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like in anything, right? Like growth has its ups and downs no matter what, right? And SUP will be no different. But yeah, in the climbing world, once it was announced that climbing was going to be a part of the Olympics, you kind of saw a lot of growing pains happen at an accelerated rate. And I think we saw a lot of that in SUP for different reasons. Obviously, we're not on an Olympic track officially yet, though there's been some power struggles that we maybe won't get all the way into today. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the sport progresses as maybe the stakes get a little higher as well.
Yeah.
But like as those things happen, decisions have to be made at an accelerated rate, and with that comes ups and downs.
Yeah. And so speaking of increasing stakes, the ICF put on another really great race or open in Gdynia in Poland. And there was quite a bit of controversy there. And so before we even get into the controversial stuff or the non-controversial stuff, we should make it clear. This is Matt and me talking. We don't necessarily represent the thoughts and feelings entirely of USA SUP and the board of directors. We get to talk about it with the board of directors, but these are our own thoughts. But we wanted to share at least some of what the organization's working on. But we also wanted to share some of the things that are coming up in the conversation for those of us who are really kind of nerding out on the sport at the high level and at the grassroots. So I'm going to queue up, Matt. I honestly, it's like the most controversial thing I think has ever happened in the sport. Maybe is that fair to say?
Ooh, if it's not, I'd call it top five. I think the whole like Boothie Marcus Hansen thing from the Tahiti race a few years back comes to mind, where there's all the like boat wakes and stuff. There's the famous Connor and Kai on the same wave kind of thing. But yeah, for sure, this is top five. And I agree. At the end of the day, please, this is just Adam and I are having an excuse to talk about the things that we like to talk about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, so let's set the stage here, and we've got the video queued up. Big race. This was the men's tech race, and it was the final, the A final. So this is for all the donuts. And we had Connor Baxter out in front. And then right behind him was Claudio Nica by about a board and a half. And you can see right here, Connor, and I think you can maybe see my mouse if you're watching, but we'll also make sure we narrate this for those of you who are just listening. Connor out in front. And actually, as we enter the action here, you can see Connor, if you can look really closely, you can see him taking a little bobble. Then there's Claudio in third place, but only by half a board length or so, is Noah Gariud, who is charging at this point. So we're going to let this thing run. There might be a little lag because we're soaking up all of our bandwidth putting this podcast on from various remote locations. But let's take a look, and I'll kind of narrate, and Matt, we'll talk about it. But what you can really see is, and it's running nice and, it bobbled. There you go. Here we go. So Claudio is charging. They're heading. They're about 20 meters from the buoy, and then we get a shot from the rear. And what you can see is, Nowick is on the inside loop, and he makes really close, I'll say like a rail rub with Claudio, and they look to be just about neck to neck. Claudio probably in front of him by a foot or two. Claudio falls as a result of their close contact and some wave action, and then reaches out and grabs Nowick's board and takes Nowick down. And it was, frankly, shocking to see because for me, Matt, I don't know about you, and believe me, I've got more experience falling off my board at buoy turns than almost anybody on the planet. And the one thing I think most of us do initially is like make yourself small. And you certainly don't want to contact your board, and you really don't want to contact someone else's board for a couple of reasons. A, you don't want to get hurt. Hitting a board when you're falling hurts. It can actually injure you. And B, you can damage the board, and C, you could mess your competitor up. So here we see this action, and I remember watching it live, or maybe it was just live to me, and thinking, what just happened? And the narrators do a really good job. I think it was Mathieu calling it, who said something to the effect of that's not okay or that's not correct. Your thoughts, Matt?
Yeah, no, I think you nailed it, right? Like, number one, most of us are not pro riders that get unlimited free boards or however many free boards these top starboard guys get. So if you fall, you try to just get the hell out of the way as to not put a face-shaped ding in the top of your board, which would be nice, or to not ruin your buddy's race, even if it's at a zero stakes race that most of us get to on a weekend or something like that. And I think Mathieu nailed it with his commentating that, in the moment as a commentator in a live race like that, they don't know what kind of rule or ruling the ICF is going to come out with on the back end of this race. So, but I think he did a good job saying like, hey, look, like whatever happens, like that's just not how you want to see a race or placings decided in a race of these kind of stakes. And yeah, you're right. Like, it was tight. I don't know what I would have done in that case, right? Like, he was falling left, Claudio, I mean, right, towards Nowick's board. So do you try to, like, shift your weight going the other way? Do you go back? Do you try to dive in between the boards? I don't know that I would have had a better solution, but it did look rather intentional with the outstretched arm. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, and listen, he was disqualified from the race for the action.
True, so we should have started with that. Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, it's kind of like the punchline. It's better, we have to tantalize the audience. I think, look, I think it's one thing if you wind up, it's one thing if you wind up, it's when I get a really deep thought, the music starts playing. It's one thing when you wind up making quick contact to make sure your head doesn't hit something. But his hand was outstretched. It stayed outstretched. I mean, it was to the point of where, like, I think naturally as an action, I can only speak for myself, but it's where you would say, listen, I just hit something, withdrawal, right? I mean, just this the human notion. Like, you hit something, you go, I got to get in. You want to protect your core. And he didn't do that. He kept grabbing the board, and I think that and listen, at the end of the race, we won't show this part, but there was some really harsh words clearly being exchanged between the two of them. So it felt, I think, like both of them felt aggrieved, and honestly, you feel bad for both of them because I do understand it was a rub in his racing kind of moment there.
Yeah.
And it turned into this thing where there was some grabbing. You and I talked about this a lot because the question is, what do you do as the race director and what recourse do you have? It's one thing when you have a disqualification in the field, but it's another thing where you've got, there's been unfortunate stuff before. And I remember, I can't remember which race it was, and you might, Matt. I think David Leal got his board sort of between someone's legs around a buoy turn by accident.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't intentional or anything like that, but that led to some changes in buoy turn rules and that sort of stuff. I know I've caught a buddy's leash before. These things happen. The problem was that this was not board-on-board contact solely. And had there not been the outreached arm, you might have said, "Oh, bad on Noah Gariud for making rail-to-rail contact there." Questions about priority, and that's another big one. When does priority overrule what we might consider common sense?
Sure, right? Because obviously Noack is racing aggressively in this situation, right? Where that buoy's inflatable and he hits it hard. If it wasn't inflatable, he would have split his board in two, right? He is really tight. He does make contact with Claudio's board. So there is for sure this element of aggressive racing that you can't take away. But yeah, so as I believe, as the ICF rule is written, it's whoever has the inside line has right of way. Is that correct?
Well, I think there's also some calculus with whoever is also further advanced down the course. And so
Okay.
Claudio did have something just more than a nose. I mean, honestly, I think he had a foot or 2 feet, just
Sure.
about. And here's the problem with this conversation, by the way. Now we're talking about, well, I'll go back. I'm actually wearing the shirt for the 70-48, which is a distance race. And rule number 8 is if they have to contact lawyers to figure out if a rule has been broken, then you're disqualified.
It's a solid rule. I like
solid
it.
rule. I don't think we want to get into a place as a sport where you see sailing, where the entire race is won. And we've seen this begin to happen in our sport, where getting to the first buoy is the end of the race sometimes almost. I mean, in flat water, it really could be, because when the rules are set so that priority is gained by inside lines and this amount of forward, et cetera, you have racers starting to think solely about maybe that first money shot to the buoy and then controlling it from there. And we get into a way more tactical race than perhaps athletic race. Some people might like that. I mean, people certainly do love to watch sailing, for instance, where the race is essentially won and lost at the start line. No kidding. You and I went and then looked, and we were talking about this, where what's a race that is fun to watch, that you don't need to be an expert in the rules and people like. And we were thinking about what's like this, and speed skating, short track speed skating. In the Olympic, that's an Olympic sport, and we were like, I wonder what the rules are for that. And Matt, what did you find when you went looking?
Yeah, the rules were less than fulfilling for what we were looking for, but it basically was just don't touch anyone. If you do touch someone, and you'll see it when you've watched speed skating every 4 years in the Olympics or whatever, you'll see a gentle hand on butt cheek of someone kind of in front of you a little bit.
Yep.
But for the most part, if somebody has, I believe it's the inside line for that one too. I can't remember, right? That if you have the inside line or if someone has the inside line and you clip them at all, you're out, right? There is some incidental contact allowed, but if there's any kind of deviation or that you cause deviation off of somebody else's line, you're donezo. There's not very much gray area there, from what I understand.
Yeah,
So
but it's essentially
neither of us are,
right. Well, you're right, and you said it. But behind the words behind that are essentially don't interfere with another racer.
right.
And now there's settings for where you can inside of these blocks, et cetera. There's a lot of nuanced stuff about where you can swing. There are more rules to short track speed skating than what we're saying, but the rule about contact is essentially you can't interfere with their trajectory. I mean, that's kind of the bottom line. They have nothing about positioning of the skater except for, someone's in front of you essentially. But you can tell, and if you watch that sport in the Olympics, you do know it to be true. It's essentially the judge's call. For me, as a fan of participating and watching the sport, I far prefer that for the potential future of SUP than, this far forward, this far inside, this far behind, this many people, et cetera, which would require unbelievable amounts of watch boats, judges on the course, et cetera. And I'm just not sure that we're a sport that can handle that kind of laborious judgment.
I agree for a bunch of reasons, but the main one being from the fun standpoint, right? Of if everybody's over analyzing your X amount of feet inside or X amount of feet in front of or behind somebody else. I feel like we kind of get lost in the sauce a little bit, right? Like you're always just measuring. There's no fun being had, and it also um, disincentivizes people to race aggressively, right? Like I think a good example is that was like I guess it was in London, Claudio in the
Yeah.
sprints and a few other were noticeably less aggressive around the turns, where they were making sure to give each other a little bit more room. Where maybe if this ICF race hadn't just literally happened like 10 days beforehand or something, you'd see people trying to whip boards around in a little bit more aggressive manner. So yeah, I agree. Having a little bit more gray area, I think is beneficial for the sport, though I for sure can see how that would add a little bit more stress onto a race director's shoulders by
Yeah.
having to have somebody to make a judgment call in the moment, right?
Yeah, well, and listen, for those who are familiar with sail racing or sailboat racing, at the end of the day, it's like almost every race has some sort of committee review. Like someone claims foul at some turn, and we don't want to see that for our sport, where people stand up in the middle of a buoy turn and raise their hand because they think they've been fouled. I think that's where we want to stay away from. So tough example right there. I think there's a little bit of, to use the sauce analogy a little bit more, there's a little extra sauce perhaps in that example. Let's check out another one. We're going to let this rip because this whole race was fascinating. This is the Busan SUP Open for APP this year. Just happened recently. And there's a couple things. I'm going to go ahead and pop this up on the screen again, and we'll let it rip. I think people, hopefully folks have seen this. And hey, by the way, while I'm getting this thing queued up, our primary spot for posting this podcast is on YouTube. You should be able to find it on Spotify and perhaps some other spots, but would love your comments on this as well. For USA SUP members, occasionally you'll see an outreach to join one of our meetings. We'd love your thoughts in person as well. And if you are not a USA SUP member, it's a reason to join. Well, it's not a committee. The board is really looking for your input on this kind of stuff because, like I said, grassroots sports, we have different rules that are observed differently in different places, and we want to make sure that we've got the best thinking out there because there's a lot of great thinking in the sport these days, particularly at the grassroots level. But hey, heading up from the grassroots level back to the APP, to the elite level, let's watch this sucker go down. And here you go. So a couple interesting things here as we start. First, Rai Taguchi is on a borrowed board, and you can kind of see the effects. He he eats it straight off the bat here. So there's a couple things to comment on before we get to the rubbing his racing at a buoy turn. Wright takes a dump, and you think he's going to be done for the race. And what happens later on is just stunning. But here we go. All the guys are, I think Shrimpy's in front at this point.
Right. So we've got Shrimpy up front, Itzel in red, and Claudio in yellow.
Yep. And a good turn there.
Rye is still a mile back.
Yeah. Interesting here. Rye takes advantage of this buoy turn that's coming up and does something absolutely amazing athletically. But he's absolutely charging. And here's the buoy turn in question that's coming up now, Matt. Let's talk about this.
Yeah, so Claudio obviously gets here first, has inside line, all the things, right, that would give him priority. And Shrimpy, which I really like, is being really aggressive here. He sticks his nose on the inside of Claudio's knees here, which is something a lot of us do at their local races and stuff. If you can get your nose inside somebody's board or knees as they turn, they're going to help you turn that much faster and easier, right? Though it sounded like Shrimpy got dinged or penalized in some way for whatever he did at that turn. Now, I'm not sure exactly what rule it was that he broke, because by my eye, that's something that I've done a lot of times at races or people have done to me. And in my opinion, that's rubbing his racing.
Yeah.
But apparently the APP has different rules. Adam, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I thought that was fun, aggressive racing. But again, the newer rules that we're seeing, it's not just the APP, it's the ICF, it's other races as well. There's just been a reaction to some really tough stuff that's gone on at buoy turns. And we've seen it. And I don't think anyone's targeted, for instance, Boothie, for example, but like he's had a couple of falls in some of these races at buoy turns that are super crowded. And it does stink when you've got someone who's probably a top contender for any given race and they wind up falling early on and get squished out. So I understand the concept behind this. Like you don't want, And frankly, going back to this short track speed skating, like that's one of the frustrations, when you see like whatever your country, Apollo Ono or whoever, get knocked down, and you're like, what? There's no repercussions for this. There's no redo. The answer is no. It's tough. So there is a counteraction here, but it's yeah. I think we got to find the right sort of middle spot here. And honestly, in my mind, I would prefer to see buoy turns be a moment of high drama where things kind of can go wrong. And as a racer, you either have to go in with a head of steam or you need to back off and watch what happens outside. And we've seen, I think of like the Pacific Paddle Games where the hammer buoy, where smart racers have taken it really wide, for instance, and made hay when everyone else wipes themselves out. I would prefer to see the buoy as a game of chance and perhaps strategy than purely of strategy, where you're just trying to get the best line and lock everyone out, knowing that the rules are in your advantage.
I agree. I think there has to be room left in whatever rule system we come up with that still incentivizes athletes to push it, right? Yep. If you're always playing cautious because you don't want to get a penalty, or it's purely strategy, that it does take the athletic element out of it a little bit. I think that would be a shame to see.
Agreed.
I don't claim to have a perfect solution for it necessarily, but I do want to voice that opinion that I think it would be a shame to see the incentive for really whipping it around a turn taken out, because I do think we all enjoy looking back at all the Battle of the Paddles and stuff like that, whether it be Dana Point or Salt Creek or wherever, that the carnage factor is fun, right? As a participant and a viewer.
Yeah, I mean, look, listen, as a participant, like that moment when you're heading redlining, heading into a buoy is like a different experience, frankly, from anything I've done, because you see it come. Like it's not. I played team sports growing up, and those sort of incidents happen quickly, right? Ball gets dropped, and all of a sudden there's, well, in my case, I played lacrosse, ground ball, and everyone's going after it, and there's mayhem. It's kind of like a ground ball or a loose ball, whatever sport you play, except like you see it coming from 20 yards away at anywhere from 5 to 6 to 7 miles an hour. And it just takes a while, and you know what's going to happen. And as a participant, that's fun. Hey, listen.
Yeah, I agree.
Let's we wouldn't be doing our jobs if we didn't. I'm going to share this clip again, because after that buoy turn, something amazing happens. What Rye does here is just nuts. If you could pick it up, because you noticed the comment by the amazing Jim Terrell, who noticed
favorite.
Yes, the mad scientist.
Yeah, so Rye does something that like seems statistically impossible once you see him just totally eat it off the beach start, and just zips by everybody here in what I assume is like 200 meters from buoy to buoy here. And it's not like the other three guys are slow or anything like that. Right?
Claudia Nick is one of the fastest sprinters in the planet.
Right. So what Rye does here is pretty remarkable from a couple of things. So I think it was on the APP's Instagram post, I saw everybody's favorite mad scientist, Jim Terrell, had a post on there commenting about how low Rye's bottom hand is through that sprint stretch. And you can actually see his bottom pinky is even or lower with the rail of the board that he's on, which when you think about it is really probably only like 3 inches off the surface of the water, which is pretty crazy. So I challenge everybody out there, go get your bottom hand real low, see how hard you can paddle with your bottom hand below the rail of your board. Good luck.
Yeah, incredible. Anyways, that was a pretty, I'll say a beautiful moment. That was really cool to watch that happen.
That's true.
Yeah, I mean, so a lot going on, and actually that race is a lot to be examined in that race. It's kind of funny too. If you're starboard, you're seeing like the guy takes off on your borrowed board, and I would imagine you're going, God, I hope he wins. Then he falls right off the line. You're like, that's not good marketing. And then he gets up.
Not great. Not what you want.
But then he gets up and blows by everybody, including another person on the starboard. And like they're standing still. It's like, all right, yin and yang.
And that, not to completely throw us off track here, but that's something you and I talked about like maybe a week or two ago, right after these races happened. Was throwing back to that ICF tech race, that the top 3 guys are all on Starboard. They're all sponsored by Starboard. They're all on the dream team, right? So theoretically, if you're Sven Rasmussen or anybody sitting in the Starboard HQ, you're you're golden, right? Like, cool, these guys are gonna like, no one's gonna mess each other up. We could have an all starboard podium in the tech final here. And then this Claudio Noah thing turns into the storm that it
Yeah.
did. And I can just imagine these guys in starboard HQ just going like, oh no, like we had it, right?
Yeah.
And but you brought up an interesting thing about like, to what degree should these be guys at the point of the sport right now be caring about team?
Yeah. I mean, there is, and Chris Parker of Sup Racer, happily still a Sup Racer, still has, I think, really great thoughts about, he's come up with the analogy of the Tour de France.
Sure.
It's USA SUP, I should say France. It, they, that concept of team paddling. And I think when you think about, like, particularly in like distance or ultra races, there's a lot to be mined there. I mean, that, like, the concept of draft trains, and just if you watch Tour de France, then you know that there's gold in them thar hills. Was that American enough to kind of compensate for my,
Yeah, no,
my French
that made
pronunciation?
up for
Okay,
it.
thank you.
Yeah, that was rednecky enough.
Yeah. All right. So, hey, speaking of American enough, let's go to Oklahoma City.
Perfect segue.
So that race happens, and you and I saw something that was like awesome. And actually, it's funny. We were both thinking, and then we wound up talking about it. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen once again, and let's see. Window. Here we go. This guy, and let's watch Oklahoma City. This is the distance race, and out in front is Daniel Hisoyo, and right behind him is Jake Portwood from Florida, and a few guys behind them, including our buddy Erie Tenorio.
We've got
and
Connor Baxter, Bodie Von Allman, and Erie. And then, so actually, if you're listening to the commentary here, they are accidentally announcing Daniel up front as Connor, but that is Daniel up front.
Yeah.
So as they come by this bridge piling, you can see Daniel at the very last second breaks right so that it forces Jake off his draft to go left around the piling. And then Daniel really puts the hammer down. And we were joking the other day when we were looking at this, like, Jake is no slouch. He's super fast, right? Like, and he really hammers and almost scratches onto Daniel's tail in flat water. But in like a glassy, flat distance race, Daniel's pretty next level. We'll tease Jake another time, or Jake, if you want to come on and tell us about what that felt like, that would be wonderful as well. But yeah, I think they have this really clever racing, right? That in a very, very glassy, controlled course, it was marketed as a 10K. I think it ended up being a little bit closer to 8K. That, you have to get creative in ways that you can break folks off your draft. Because what Daniel doesn't want to have happen is to tow 5 really fast guys, a bunch of whom are very fast sprinters, 7 of those 8Ks through, and then have them zip by, right? So I thought that was a really creative way to try to break somebody off of his tail.
It was amazing. I thought it was so clever. And frankly, everyone behind him in that draft pack, probably a faster sprinter than Daniel. No disrespect to Daniel, but those are very fast sprinters. And you're absolutely right. And listen, I mean, Jake is from that spot that you and I love down in Jupiter, Florida, where they race all the time. And they race in draft packs all the time. And, so if anyone was going to get back on or was going to be able to stay on his draft, it was going to be Jake and Erie. And of course, Connor is Connor. And Bodie is still not, I think, completely found what he's capable of. So you never know when he's going to just blow up in a race as he's done before. So Daniel knew he had to make a move. And here's what's interesting. We had opined about whether or not he saw it as a moment of opportunity or if it was something that he had sort of pre-planned coming into the race. And you, paddle nerd, king of paddle nerds, king of all paddle nerds, remembered back to an episode at the 2019 Carolina Cup. You raced in that one, didn't you?
I did. That was my first time at Carolina Cup, actually, in any race. I did the Graveyard that year. And so, yeah, just to set the scene, it was very mellow by Graveyard conditions, not very much wind at all. And the wind we did have was all offshore. So the waves were quite minimal. There was no downwind section to be had at all. So for the flat water guys in the race, it was kind of like a dream come true. So Bruno had actually led, I think, like 3/4 of the race. Boothie ended up with the win. But where we're going to pick up the clip here is maybe like 1.5 miles or so from the finish line. So they've paddled somewhere between 11 and 12 miles already. And this is being broadcast from Candace's phone. So the video we're glad to have it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this is Bruno up front on the whiteboard and Boothie behind him on the starboard. They've been kind of drafting up and back and up and back since they got back into the ocean leg here. So it maybe been like a mile and a half or 2 miles since they'd teamed up. And so what was happening here was because there's the offshore wind, everybody's hugging the shore a lot closer than usual. And there's this big pier that sticks out in Wrightsville Beach down there that normally is totally off limits. You can't go under the pier. You got to come way outside, where most of the time you would have no desire to go under the pier. But in the broadcasting of this, you can hear Candace and Byron Kurt going up and back about like, hey, I think these guys are going to go under the pier. Hopefully not everybody gets DQ'd from the top end of the pack here. But yeah, again, so you were kind of joking that maybe this was shared in the Hasuyo household a little bit. But Boothie does something very similar to Bruno that Daniel did to Jake here as they come under.
Yeah, it's amazing because Boothie does two things. First, he kind of rubs up against the piling to send Bruno off of his tail. And then part two is that he winds up not just shedding him on the pilings of the pier, he winds up leading him then, after he sheds him, into this where the waves are just about to break, which is a really tough spot to draft because, of course, you know, the that shore swell is grabbing your fin and whatnot. So really clever move. I just honestly, it's next level. Like it's not the kind of stuff I think after however many miles of really hard paddling you'd think to execute, but you have a sense that Boothie probably had this identified as an opportunity even before the race started.
For sure. I mean, this was a purposeful decision on his part, right? Like they'd been trading up and back. He purposely, I believe right before where we picked it up, he just stopped paddling and let Bruno take over the lead a few minutes beforehand to make sure that when he gets to the point of the race where he envisions himself making a move, he's got a little bit of gas saved up. And, you know, Boothie gets categorized as a flat water guy that I know he does not like that label. He's won a lot of ocean races, both in a surf ski and on a stand-up. And so I think he knew that if he could just have an inch or two of breathing room, he was betting on himself to just be able to muscle it out for that last mile or so.
Yeah, I agree. He does get he gets miscast as that a lot, and I think maybe because of a handful of struggles going up against, by the way, some profoundly powerful open water paddlers. And when you don't necessarily best Tituan or Connor out in giant swell, that doesn't mean you're not an open water paddler. It just means
Right.
you're not quite as good as them, perhaps, at that element. And there's no shame there. Hey, I mean, so much. Well, there you go. Well, that was an older clip, but it refers back to, of course, Oklahoma City. But man, there was a lot going on this summer. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to be Pollyannish about it, but when I see our local race here in Seattle, and of course you moved away from Seattle to the Southeast this year, but our local race in Seattle continued to grow this year. What's gone on where I paddle sometimes on vacation, where my folks live down in Florida and Jupiter, which we discussed, has grown exponentially. You hear about this going on in a handful of places. It feels, and then you see these races. I mean, the Euro Cup's gone strong. Oklahoma City could have had a bigger turnout if there had been more time in advance, and I think there would have been, frankly. But a great turnout nonetheless. There are wonderful things going on. It feels like the demise of stand-up paddle racing was declared a little too early, and what we've seen in terms of big dollar events may have some of them definitely vanished in this country. But the overall number of paddlers that I'm seeing, even at like all kinds of paddle events, paddle row events, you know, that there's a lot of sit-down boats at, the number of stand-up paddlers involved in those is growing as well. I don't know, Matt, what you're seeing, if that jives with what's going on in South Carolina and environs and what you're hearing from friends around the country.
Yeah, you know, I'm still getting used to the paddle community here in Charleston and in and around just the Southeast in general. But yeah, obviously Jupiter, Florida's got a notoriously large and involved SUP scene there. And you kind of alluded to this earlier, that the grassroots end of things is a really important trial by fire error space in our sport right now, for it to be able to try out new formats, try different ideas. Then, you know, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, right? Mm-hmm. but I got to go to shout out to Rob and Megan at the Goat Boater in TKK. They've got a really cool thing where they have one race a month for 6 months, and each race is a slightly different format. And after the last race, Rob and Megan asked us like, okay, what was your favorite race? What was your least favorite race? What would you just chuck out the window? Like, and they're just looking for ways to improve. And I think that the sport just needs as much of that as we can get right now. And like you mentioned at the beginning, please hit us up, whether it's in the comments or via USA SUP email or whatever. Like, we want to hear cool ideas that are out there. I tried a bunch of different race formats this summer that I had never even thought about trying before. And then you mentioned it too, that, we're trying to learn things from other endurance sports, whether it be speed skating, sailing, velodrome bike racing has a million different formats and stuff like that. So, I'm excited about where the sport is at, that people are willing to just kind of try some fun stuff. And I think happy accident about having those bigger name events kind of come out is that people are excited to just try fun stuff again. It doesn't need to be this perfectly run event that has a giant jumbo check for the same 3 pro paddlers that come out all the time, right? But it's fun to just get out and try some wacky stuff, and if you have fun, great, and if you don't, we'll change it and try something new next time.
Yeah. Hey, so great quick segue here, because I'll go back to what I said before. Actually, a couple of things. First, if you're watching on YouTube, I think we're legally obligated to say smash the like button.
I believe we are contractually obligated.
Please smash it. And subscribe. There'll be more of these. Going forward, we'll probably have guests on occasion. I would like to think. You and I aren't fit to talk like this, and people aren't fit to hear us going on forever like this.
God, I hope so.
No, but we'll be bringing people in from around, probably most likely centered on the U.S., because this is, after all, USA SUP. I also want to encourage folks, again, if you can, join. Here's our website, usasup.org. You go here, you click the join button. A lot of folks actually, and probably some who are watching this, signed up early on to be on our contact list. Not the same as being a member. If you're not sure if you're a member, you're probably not. You should have gotten a sticker, a really cool sticker that's worth joining. And really where the money goes to is to help continue to build the organization and make it strong enough so that we can stick around, do things like, and there's a lot of work going on in the background, by the way, for setting up rankings, a national championship event, much more, getting rules put together, collated, I should say. We're not necessarily making a rule book, et cetera, but there's a lot of work going on to make, frankly, your participation in the sport a lot more fun. And if you're a race director, to make your job a lot easier. So like we said, we're trying to knit the community together. Want to thank you for tuning in the first place. So smash, subscribe, join, contribute. But thank you. And of course, really would love your comments about the stuff we're talking about. You can call us idiots. It'll hurt our feelings actually very deeply. I'm not going to pretend we don't care, or it'll hurt my feelings. I don't know about you, Matt. You okay?
No. There will be deep crying sessions, okay. 100%.
Yeah,
but we want to hear it anyways.
Yeah. It's important for us to come to terms with those who don't agree. Hey, Matt, any final thoughts from you?
No, thanks for, to you, Adam, and to everybody who took the time out of their day to listen to 2 Schmoes want to chat about stand-up paddling. We're excited to hopefully do a lot more of this. And if anybody has any topics, people who want to get on here and chat with us about the sport, please reach out. We want any excuse to be able to continue to do this. Yeah, and we're targeting to do it monthly pretty much. So, and there's plenty to talk about. Even in the winter season is really, I think, when we'll be able to bring also probably a little bit more as we make sure that our fellow board members for USA SUP are up to speed. But we'll be bringing more news directly from sanctioned news from the organization rather than just our thoughts and feelings. But hey, listen, it's been fun, Matt. It's always fun talking. I'm sure we'll probably hang up and then talk about the things we didn't talk about some more. But next time in a month or so, subscribe. Thanks. See y'all.